May 28, 1987. Low, overcast skies above Moscow. The city breathes a metallic, heavy air, an air that seems motionless, frozen in a time that refuses to disappear. Over the Kremlin's towers, red flags flutter without strength. Below, the trams squeal on wet rails and the crowd walks without looking up. No one imagines that, thousands of meters above them, a white light plane is shattering the greatest myth of the Soviet Union. Among the clouds, the Cessna 172. Skyhawk descends slowly, its single-piston engine vibrating like an insect lost in the immensity of the air. In the cockpit, a 19-year-old holds the yoke with both hands. His name is Matthias Rust, and his light eyes reflect the blurred northern horizon. The altimeter reads less than 2,000 feet, the fuel barely a sliver on the needle. On his knees, a wrinkled map with a route traced in pencil. He has flown for more than 6 hours from the Baltic Sea to the heart of the Soviet Union. He has crossed invisible borders, sleeping radars, orders no one dared to give. In the co-pilot seat, he carries a Polaroid camera, a portable radio, and a handwritten letter. To the leaders of East and West, I come in the name of peace. Through the dirty windscreen, Rust makes out a flash, the golden gleam of St. Basil's domes. The light pierces the clouds like a signal. He adjusts the compass, takes a breath, and murmurs softly, more a thought than a prayer. If I reach the Kremlin, the world will know that peace is possible. Below, the Moskva River snakes between gray buildings and stone bridges. The little plane drops, lines up with the current, grazes the damp air of midday. Pedestrians stop in their tracks. Some look up, confused. Others point in disbelief at that tiny machine approaching from the horizon. There are no sirens, no alarms, no interceptor jets. The sky over Moscow, the most guarded on the planet, remains silent. Rust trims to 100 knots and looks for a landing spot. He sees Red Square, but the crowd covers it completely. So he banks slightly left and lines up with the Bolshoi Moskvoretsky Bridge, a strip of asphalt crossing the river right in front of the Kremlin. He lowers the landing gear. The wheels squeal on the pavement. The Cessna bounces once, twice, and settles. It rolls a few more meters and stops. For an instant, everything is still. The engine goes quiet. The young German opens the cabin door and climbs down. Pedestrians gather around him, fascinated. No one understands what they're seeing. Some applaud, thinking it's a show. Others watch in silence, unable to associate that small machine with the word invasion. Rust smiles, raises a hand in a friendly gesture, and says with a foreign accent, "Do not be afraid. I have come in peace." A few meters away, the Kremlin's domes shine under a weak sun. No one fires, no one stops him. In a country that believed itself protected by the most formidable shield in the world, a boy from Hamburg has just landed without permission, without weapons, and without an escape plan. And in that instant, while guards run and passers-by whisper, the history of the 20th century changes course. In 1987, the world seemed to be approaching its own thaw. After 4 decades of tension, the Cold War was slowly yielding under the uncertain warmth of a new political language. In Moscow, Mikhail Gorbachev spoke of perestroika, reconstruction, and glasnost, transparency. They were new words in a country accustomed to silence. The economy was sinking, factories were rusting, and the borders of the empire held more by inertia than by force. But not everyone believed in those reforms. Inside the Soviet apparatus, change was not perceived as hope, but as treason. The army detested it, fearing that openness would weaken its authority. The KGB eyed it with suspicion, convinced transparency only served the enemy. And while Gorbachev's speeches were applauded in the West, whispers of distrust and fear echoed in the corridors of Soviet power. The Soviet Union still defined itself by its capacity for control. It was a watchful state, obsessed with order and discipline, that had woven a web of radars, interceptors, and bureaucracies capable of registering any movement above its borders. From the Barents Sea to the Caucasus, thousands of antennas turned day and night, listening to the sky. Manuals from the Ministry of Defense boasted that no object, living or dead, can cross our airspace without being seen. Moscow was the heart of that system, the most protected city on Earth, surrounded by concentric rings of air bases, anti-air missiles, long-range radars, and interception stations. The Soviet capital was an untouchable sanctuary. On the Army's secret maps, every kilometer of Moscow's air had a code, a defensive line, a responsible officer. The Kremlin slept beneath that invisible dome of steel and vigilance, convinced that nothing, not a plane, not a drone, not a mistake, could pierce it. But that net of control also had another, less visible function. It did not only watch the sky, it watched those who watched. Each station watched the next. Each officer was supervised by another. The system fed on its own distrust. No one wanted to be the first to act, nor the last to do so. And between those layers of fear and obedience, military efficiency became a mirage. On the surface, the Soviet Union still looked like a colossus. Its flag waved over half the world, its submarines crossed the oceans, and its rockets still carried cosmonauts into space. But inside, the giant had begun to creak. Factories produced less, barracks suffered shortages, morale crumbled. The USSR kept the shape of a great power, but no longer had its pulse. In that context, the air defense network, the jewel of Soviet pride, had become more symbol than shield. It was the promise of invulnerability in a country afraid to admit its own fragility. Every radar, every protocol, every watchtower represented not just a military defense, but an act of faith. Faith in technology, faith in the system, faith in the perfection of a machine that could not fail, because to admit it would be to admit that the state itself could fail. But in every perfect machine, error always lurks in silence. And on May 28, 1987, that silence would be broken from the sky. The Soviet Union could see everything, hear everything, control everything, or so it believed, because every layer of control was also a layer of arrogance, and that blind faith in its own perfection was about to be its undoing. Hamburg, 1968. In a city that still showed the scars of war, Matthias Rust was born, the son of a textile merchant and a nurse. The family lived in a quiet neighborhood, without luxuries and without want. His childhood was not marked by poverty or heroism, but by a normality that unsettled him. From a young age, Rust was fascinated by maps and engines. He could spend hours tracing imaginary lines over a globe or dismantling devices to see how they worked. He was drawn to the idea of movement, distance, the horizon. His mother would recall years later that, at 10 years old, Matthias spent afternoons watching planes take off from Hamburg airport. He wasn't interested in the destinations, she said, only in the fact that they were leaving. At school, he was a decent, quiet student, more observer than participant. His teachers described him as a boy with a strange calm, detached from competition. A classmate wrote in a yearbook, "Rust doesn't argue, Rust watches." When he turned 16, he discovered sport aviation. He joined a local flying club and began training in a Cessna under the supervision of retired Lufthansa pilots. He spent weekends at the airfield, cleaning hangars and helping with maintenance in exchange for minutes in the air. After his first solo, the instructor asked what he'd felt. Rust answered without thinking. "Nothing, only silence." It was a sincere reply. In the air, the world's noise seemed to switch off. To pay for flight time, he worked in a supermarket stocking shelves. His wages barely covered an hour of training a week, but that didn't discourage him. Aviation was not a hobby, but a way of thinking. In the sky, he found a different logic, where control depended not on power or hierarchy, but on balance. He had no political ambitions. He did not belong to any movement, nor was he interested in ideological speeches that still divided Europe. But he was part of a generation born among ruins and walls, a generation that had inherited the guilt and weariness of the post-war era. In his diary, he wrote scattered lines that sounded more like thoughts than plans. "Europe is tired of walls. I will do something that knocks them down without violence." His flight instructor, a middle-aged man with military patience, watched him with a mix of tenderness and concern. "You're a good pilot, Matthias," he said, "but you lack fear." Rust smiled. "Without fear, one flies better." "Without fear, one does not land," the instructor replied. To his friends, Rust was simply a dreamer. He spoke little, but when he did, he said things that sounded too big for his age. He believed ideas could fly like airplanes. If launched in the right direction, they could reach anywhere. His family did not fully understand his obsession. His father, pragmatic, wanted him to study engineering or business. His mother supported him quietly, though every takeoff filled her with a foreboding she could not explain. He was a good boy, she would recall, but he had that look of someone who is already elsewhere. At 18, he obtained his private pilot's license. He celebrated without a party, without speeches. He simply went to the airfield and, alone, made a short circuit over the field. From above, the world seemed ordered, small, accessible. Perhaps that is why, in the months that followed, his obsession became purpose. For him, the border was not a line drawn on a map, but an idea imposed by fear. And if fear could be imposed with walls, perhaps it could also be brought down with a gesture. Rust believed that madness and courage were the same thing, seen from different angles. They differed only in the outcome. And he did not yet know it, but his outcome would be etched into the history of the 20th century. March of 1987. In his room in Hamburg, Matthias Rust watches grainy television images. On the screen appear Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev shaking hands at the Reykjavik summit. They smile for the cameras, speak of peace, of treaties, of trust. But in the end, the images dissolve into the same headlines as always. Negotiations fail. Rust switches off the TV and remains silent for a few seconds. The war has not ended, he thinks. It has only become invisible. That night he writes in his diary, "If leaders cannot approach each other, someone will have to do it for them." A young European crosses borders to deliver a message of peace. It is not yet a plan, just an intuition. But in the days that follow, the idea becomes an obsession. Rust does not seek fame or adventure. He seeks meaning. He wants a gesture impossible to ignore, something so absurd that it forces the world to stop. He believes a single symbolic act can weigh more than 1,000,000 speeches. He begins to plan in secret. He spends afternoons at the library studying aeronautical charts and civil routes that cross Europe. He focuses on the most crowded air corridors where his little plane could blend in with commercial traffic. He calculates flight times, fuel consumption, and distances. He learns the frequencies of Soviet control towers and notes the identification codes of international flights. Every detail becomes a piece of a map only he understands. He chooses the aircraft carefully. A Cessna 172 DECJB, white with red stripes, light, stable, and with enough range to cover nearly 2,000 kilometers. It has no radar, no armament, not even a powerful transmitter. It is a training plane, the most common in the world. And precisely for that reason, perfect. Rust knows the Soviet airspace is full of radars, but he also knows that the enemy of every complex system is routine. He has read that civilian planes, weather flights, and local tests can generate similar echoes on border radars. If he flies low, slowly, and without a hostile code, he might go unnoticed. He does not plan to outwit the system, but to confuse it. To justify the flight, he informs his flight school that he will make a long-distance training flight bound for Iceland. He prepares the documentation, checks the engine, installs an auxiliary tank, and loads provisions: bread, chocolate, apple juice, a Polaroid camera, and a portable compass. Nothing else. He tells his parents the same. His mother, worried, asks if the trip is not too long for such a young pilot. "Do not worry," he replies. In the sky, all roads are straight. For weeks, Rust rehearses trajectories in his head. He draws the route on the map: Hamburg, Denmark, Finland, Moscow. He has no permits or visas, but he does not need them if he can arrive unseen. The idea is not to ask for permission, it is to provoke a question. If a plane can cross all borders without being shot down, why do they exist? The plan has an absurd, almost childlike purity, but behind it lies a disquieting determination. Rust is not a reckless adventurer. He knows the risks, he understands the odds, and even so, his logic drives him forward. In a letter he never sent, he wrote, "I do not fear dying. I fear that no one will listen." In the days before takeoff, the young man spends his nights sleepless, mentally reviewing each leg. Sometimes he doubts. At other times, he convinces himself that his gesture, even if it failed, would be worth it. He has no allies, no sponsors, no one's backing. Only one conviction, that individual faith can cross the walls ideology built. On the eve of his departure, he leaves his watch on the table and writes one last line in his notebook. Air has no borders. The rest are human inventions. The next morning, he heads to the Hamburg airfield with a flight jacket, a wrinkled map, and an unsettling calm in his eyes. To everyone, he is just another young man about to make a practice flight. To him, it is the beginning of the most improbable act of the Cold War. His destination is not Iceland. It is the enemy's heart. Over the following weeks, Matthias Rust turned his room into an improvised operations center. The desk was covered with maps, plotters, wind tables, and clippings from aviation magazines. He traced routes with a red pencil, calculated consumption, and noted margins of error on the backs of maps. He wanted to do it alone. No accomplices, no witnesses, no turning back. His plan was simple in appearance, but almost impossible in execution. Hamburg, Kiel, Denmark, Finland, Moscow. A civil air corridor that would become halfway an incursion into the most restricted airspace on the planet. Rust did not trust luck, but he did trust other people's lack of coordination. He knew that in a system saturated with protocols, doubt was his best camouflage. On May 13, 1987, he took off for the first time. He filed his flight as a practice trip to Reykjavik, Iceland. The instructor suspected nothing. In the air, the little Cessna 172 behaved with its usual serenity. He landed in the Faroe Islands, then in Norway, without incident. But the next day, instead of continuing toward the Atlantic, he changed course to the southeast, toward Helsinki. The movement was so discreet that no one noticed. To Finnish air traffic controllers, his signal seemed like that of an ordinary civil flight. They logged his registration, DECJB, as a private aircraft on a training route. Rust landed at Malmö Airport on May 25, 3 days before the final flight. He passed customs with a polite smile, checked into a cheap hostel, and spent the nights awake, listening to the wind in the trees. In his notes, he wrote a short sentence. I will wait for cloudy skies. That way, no one will see peace coming. On May 28, dawn came gray and cold. A layer of low clouds covered Helsinki, and the wind blew from the north. It was the perfect weather to disappear. Rust arrived at the airfield early, wearing a flight jacket and carrying a small case. He greeted the mechanics casually, checked the oil level, the ailerons, and the auxiliary tank. No one noticed anything strange. He had the distracted air of someone going through a routine. At 12:21, midday, he climbed into the cockpit, set the instruments, and turned on the radio. Helsinki Tower, this is Delta Echo Charlie Juliet Bravo. Requesting clearance for local training, heading west. Cleared DECJB, maintain contact. Roger. He took off smoothly. The little plane climbed until it vanished into the clouds. For the first minutes, he maintained the declared heading toward Stockholm. Then, slowly, he turned east. The compass now pointed to the Soviet Union. The Helsinki controller called him on the radio. DECJB, confirm your altitude. Rust kept his voice calm. 3,500 feet visual training. I will return in 2 hours. Copy. It was the last verified communication. Within minutes, his signal disappeared from Finnish radar. Controllers assumed he had gone down at sea. A search and rescue protocol began in the Gulf of Finland. Norwegian helicopters and Coast Guard vessels swept the area for hours. No trace was found. Meanwhile, a little more than 300 meters above the waves, Rust kept flying east, hugging the lower edge of the clouds. The radio was off. The transponder disconnected. The young German, 19 years old, flew over a gray sea toward a country that, according to every military manual, should have been impossible to reach. In the co-pilot's seat, his map trembled with the engine's vibrations. In the upper margin, next to the route marked in red ink, he had written a single word: bridge. At 3 in the afternoon, he crossed the Gulf and left Western Europe behind. Ahead stretched the closed watch sky of the Soviet Union, and without knowing it, at that exact moment, the most humiliating flight the USSR would suffer in its entire history began. In Helsinki, controllers watched the Cessna's signal die halfway across the Gulf of Finland. There was no Mayday call, no trail of smoke. A faint echo appeared for a few seconds, then nothing. At 1500 hours, they sounded the alert. Finnish newspapers wrote the next day. Small civil aircraft disappears over the sea. Possible accident. Rust, however, was still in the air, flying beneath the clouds just over 300 meters above the Baltic surface. The waves stretched like sheets of lead. The horizon was a featureless gray line. He turned off the radio and set the compass east. On his panel, the altimeter quivered. The engine, a simple 160 horsepower Lycoming, maintained a steady hum. He had no contact with anyone, nor did he know whether radars were tracking him. At that hour, the Soviet Union was watching him. At a coastal base near Tallinn, a radar of the PVO defense system detected a minimal signal moving slowly inland. The operator logged it and alerted the duty superior. Possible small aircraft, no transponder. The commander frowned. What type? Too low to identify. For a moment, they discussed whether a fighter should be scrambled. In the end, they decided to wait. The signal vanished again into the clouds. On the ground, the Soviets believed it was a local plane or an unreported exercise. Civil and military communication channels were saturated. No one wanted to make unnecessary calls. In a system where every order implied responsibility, inaction seemed safer than initiative. Rust crossed the Estonian coast unopposed. Below him, forests stretched to the horizon. He had officially entered Soviet territory. If anyone had wanted to stop him, a single missile would have sufficed. But no missile was fired. At 4:30, he passed over Lake Peipus on the border between Estonia and Russia. The air grew more turbulent. For a few minutes, he thought the engine would fail. He gripped the yoke and dropped a little lower. The radio remained silent. He knew every minute was a gift, that at any instant he might hear the roar of a fighter or see a plume rise from the ground. But nothing happened. In Helsinki, rescue teams flew circles over the sea, searching for wreckage. In Germany, his parents answered a call from the embassy. Your son has disappeared. Probable accident. The news spread quickly. In a matter of hours, Matthias Rust was considered a young man dead on a senseless flight. Above Soviet clouds, the supposed corpse was still alive and advancing. The compass swung between east and southeast. In the distance, the sun began to sink behind a curtain of clouds. Rust looked at the horizon and smiled serenely. For him, everything was still according to plan. When night began to fall over the sea, the little Cessna entered Soviet airspace in earnest. Radars picked it up again for a few seconds, classified it as a local aircraft, and lost it once more. In the day's logs, operators would write, "Unidentified echo, probable internal flight." No one imagined that this point, so small and so slow, would continue its direct course toward Moscow. Rust adjusted his heading. In his headset, he heard only the wind. And in the silence of the Baltic sky, a German boy kept flying toward the heart of an empire that still believed nothing could pass through it. Around 5 in the afternoon, Soviet radars in the Pskov military district detected a weak echo moving slowly from the northwest. On the control center's green screen, that point seemed insignificant, a glint that came and went with the sweep of the beam. It transmitted no identification code, had no flight plan, and its speed was anomalous, too slow for a military plane, too steady for a bird. The duty officer watched the monitor in silence. He stepped closer, adjusted the radar's gain, and saw how the echo held. "Do we have civil traffic in this sector?" he asked. The operator checked the flight list. "Negative, no registered flights." "A local plane?" "Could be. The aero clubs have had transponder problems." At that moment, another point appeared briefly, then vanished. The radar took it for interference. In the control room, the technicians exchanged looks. One of them, younger, murmured, "If it does not respond, it should be classified as an intruder." The shift commander, a colonel tired of routine, raised his hand. "There is no confirmation of hostility. We wait." In the Soviet Union, no one wanted to be the first to make a decision that might turn into a mistake. Shooting down a civilian plane meant an international scandal, letting an enemy pass, a court-martial. Between those two extremes, the instinct was always the same: do not decide. For a few minutes, radars kept tracking the echo. The signal was intermittent. Sometimes it doubled, other times it disappeared altogether. In the automated reports, it was recorded as unidentified target, probable domestic aircraft. Operators noted the time, sealed the log, and moved on to the next entry. None imagined that the point was a German youth flying without radio under 1,000 meters on a course straight to Moscow. Rust, unaware of the bureaucratic chaos around him, held the controls. Precisely. The landscape below was an endless expanse of forest and villages. From the air, the Soviet Union looked asleep, a motionless country. He saw no major highways, no factories, no large cities, only the green and gray monotony of the north. Sometimes a column of smoke rose from a chimney, or a silver river curved between trees. There were no fighters, no sirens, nothing to indicate danger, only silence. At the Ostrov Control Center, another radar caught his signal. The operator, following protocol, relayed the information to higher command. The answer came minutes later. Target likely domestic. Do not act. The operator lowered his gaze, wrote the note, and filed it. Anywhere else, it might have looked like negligence. In the Soviet Union of 1987, it was a survival measure. No officer wanted to be responsible for an international misunderstanding. And no one wanted to repeat the Cal 007 scandal, the civilian Korean airliner shot down by mistake 4 years earlier. That tragedy had left scars all along the chain of command. Rust kept heading south, not knowing that every prudent decision protected him. He had entered airspace measured not only in kilometers but in fear. Every station that saw him preferred to believe he did not exist. Every eye that detected him looked the other way. In his cockpit, the young German took a sip of apple juice and consulted the map. He had covered nearly 2/3 of the journey. The compass vibrated on the panel. His objective lay about 2 hours ahead. He felt neither euphoria nor fear, only focus. The Cessna's engine hummed like a clock. Below him, an entire country breathed in silence, a country defined by its vigilance, now failing to see the intruder moving at its very heart. The moment of doubt had passed, and that doubt was already the first crack in the iron wall. For decades, the Soviet Union's military pride had rested on an acronym, PVO, Protivovozdushnaya Oborona, the state air defense. It was a colossus within the colossus, a structure separate from the Army and the Air Force with its own chain of command, its own budget, and a single purpose: that nothing, absolutely nothing, could cross Soviet skies without permission. The system covered 11 military zones, from the Baltic coasts to the Pacific's far reaches. Around Moscow, its core, concentric rings of defense spread outward. S-75 Divina missile bases, mobile batteries of S-125 and S-200, MiG-23 and MiG-25 fighters ready to intercept within minutes, and a network of diurnal radars capable, in theory, of seeing up to 1,000 kilometers beyond the borders. On the General Staff's maps, those rings formed a perfect shield. Every dot represented a radar station, every line a zone of responsibility. Thousands of men worked day and night in underground bunkers, staring at green screens that displayed a sky ordered by codes and tracks. It was the vastest machine ever built to look upward. The Kremlin considered it its most precious jewel. In May Day parades, announcers spoke of the impenetrable shield of the socialist motherland. In official documentaries, PVO officers appeared as heroic guardians of the sky, capable of detecting a missile before it left its silo. Propaganda called it the eternal eye of Mother Russia. But in 1987, that eye was tired. The PVO suffered the same wear as the whole Soviet apparatus. Radar stations had obsolete equipment, generators failed, spare parts were scarce. Many operators worked double shifts, and fighters remained on the ground for lack of fuel. Maintenance was postponed, reports were massaged, and orders moved with bureaucratic slowness. In theory, each ring was to react immediately to an intrusion. In practice, each station waited for confirmation from the next. Commanders feared making decisions without superior authorization. A shot fired wrongly could cost them their rank, or worse, and thus, the network that should have responded in seconds became a prisoner of its own hierarchy. In military language, that was called command discipline. In reality, it was fear. No radar wanted to be the one to sound a false alarm. No pilot wanted to be the one to shoot down the wrong plane. Since the KL-007 incident in 1983, when a civilian Korean flight was mistakenly downed over Sakhalin, the shadow of shame weighed on everyone. The manual said, "Verify before firing." No one dared to do it. In control rooms, echoes appeared and disappeared, classified with words that hid doubt: probable civilian aircraft, unconfirmed target, instrument error. And each of those small silences, those omissions, wove an invisible net of negligence. Soviet air defense no longer ran on efficiency, but on fear. Not on speed, but on caution. The men tasked with protecting the sky had become bureaucrats of the air, prisoners of the chain of command that watched over them. Meanwhile, the little white Cessna kept advancing unknowingly, flying low, slow, steady, through an airspace that on maps seemed impenetrable. The net remained intact, but its reflection was cracking. The Kremlin's pride was still there, in parades, in reports, in words. But in the air, in that vast, silent sky, the net that should see everything now saw nothing. And within its perfect rings, a tiny dot moved unopposed toward the heart of Moscow. As the sun began to sink on the horizon, Matthias Rust kept heading south. The Cessna stayed stable, though the air grew denser and more turbulent. The young pilot reduced speed, dipped the nose, and adjusted altitude to avoid a cloud layer that threatened to swallow him. The maneuver was smooth, almost instinctive, but enough to erase him from radar. At the Pskov Air Base, operators had been watching him carefully. For several minutes, the echo appeared on their screens, faint but persistent, until it faded. The chief technician, a man with 30 years of service, noted the time and picked up the phone. "We have loss of signal, possible landing or radar failure." "Identification?" asked the commander. "Low speed, heading south. Could be a training plane from the Leningrad district." The commander nodded indifferently. "Log it as a local flight." The report was filed, stamped with a bureaucratic seal. No action required. That small act of routine, insignificant among thousands of daily records, sufficed to erase the intruder's existence. Farther south, at the Torzhok base, a second radar picked up his signal. The operator classified it immediately as unidentified target, variable altitude. Minutes later, the command center issued an intercept order. 2 MiG-23 pilots ran to their jets. Engines roared. Turbines began to heat the air. But before takeoff, the regional staff called. "Cancel the launch," ordered the voice on the line. "There is congestion of civil traffic in the western corridor, probable misidentification." The officer looked at his men, undecided, but obeyed. "Shut down engines." The MiG sat motionless on the tarmac, while hundreds of kilometers above them, the little Cessna kept tracing its solitary path toward Moscow. On the base, pilots removed their helmets in silence. One of them, young, remarked with a tired half-smile, "If we are ever attacked, we will first ask for written permission." No one answered. Everyone knew it was true. Rust knew none of this. In his cockpit, the radio was still mute and the engine kept its steady drone. The sun bathed the cabin with an orange glow, and for the first time in hours, the young man felt a moment of calm. He flew over a country that did not see him, sustained by chance and other people's indecision. Every radar station that detected him found an excuse not to intervene. Interference, instrument errors, bad weather, training flights. Every officer who had to decide preferred to leave it to someone else. And thus, without shots, without pursuit, without even a formal alert, Rust crossed the outer rings of Soviet air defense. In Moscow, no one knew that an unauthorized civilian aircraft was already in inner airspace. In routine reports, no anomaly appeared. In barracks, the day followed its usual course. And in the air, a German youth continued his impossible flight, protected by the Cold War's most improbable chain of errors. The Cessna moved forward unhurried, unaware of the political disaster its journey was brewing. With each kilometer, the myth of Soviet control crumbled a little more, not by sabotage nor by treason, but by fear of making a mistake. Sometimes empires do not fall from external blows. They fall when their own guardians stop believing in what they protect. And that afternoon, over the forests of northern Russia, the sky of the Soviet Union had stopped believing. More than 6.5 hours have passed since Matthias Rust took off from Helsinki. The horizon ahead opens, and through the afternoon haze, a gray blot slowly grows. Moscow, the capital of an empire. For the first time in the flight, the young German feels the weight of fatigue. His arms ache, his neck is tight, and the engine vibrates with an irregular rhythm. He has been in the air so long, he no longer remembers the sound of silence. As he nears the city, the sky fills with traffic. Airliners enter and depart Sheremetyevo Airport, government helicopters hover over the outskirts, and below, small civil aircraft cross permitted air corridors. Controllers are saturated, screens flicker with dozens of overlapping signals. No one notices the tiny echo of a light plane advancing slowly from the north, without code or flight plan. Rust reduces power and drops to 600 meters. The engine growls weakly. Below, the landscape transforms. Straight highway lines give way to endless avenues, concrete buildings, and factories capped with smoke. To his right, the Moskva River reflects the evening light. He decides to follow it. The river will guide him to the city's heart. On the ground, pedestrians begin to notice him. In parks and avenues, some lift their eyes, confused. It is not common to see a light plane over central Moscow, and even less at such a low altitude. Children point at the sky, adults squint, some smile, others stop to watch with unease. "It must be a parade rehearsal," says a woman. "Or a foreign plane that's lost," answers a man without looking away. No one suspects the truth. That fragile, white, solitary machine has just crossed without resistance the most feared air defense network on the planet. Rust follows the river, looking for a place to land. The city unfurls beneath him like an immense maze. He sees Luzhniki Stadium, the rooftops of Moscow State University, grand boulevards packed with traffic. On his panel, the fuel drops to the last sliver. In Moscow's control towers, operators receive brief reports of an unknown aircraft sighting, but the chaos of civil air traffic prevents a coordinated response. One supervisor orders an investigation, another orders the report ignored. At 6:55 in the evening, a controller comments in a low voice. If it's an enemy, it's already too late. In the cockpit, Rust feels the air grow denser. He drops a bit more, barely to 300 meters. The sunset bathes the city in golden light. In the distance between rooftops, he sees the domes of St. Basil's and the red wall of the Kremlin. His heart races, but his mind stays cool. He does not think of glory or danger, only of landing. He bleeds off speed. The wind pushes the plane westward, he corrects gently. The river bends and the Kremlin's reflection glitters on the water. Below, passers-by stop. Some think it's a film shoot. Others begin to murmur nervously. A light plane over Red Square is something that does not happen even in military parades. Rust circles the city, looking for open space. Red Square seems ideal, but it is full of people. Too risky. He turns once more over the river, seconds stretch. From the ground, a traffic officer watches the plane pass over the Kremlin and disappear behind buildings. "Did you see it?" he asks his partner. "Yes," the other replies with a mix of astonishment and resignation. "But it isn't our business." Above, the engine coughs and stabilizes again. Rust exhales. Ahead, the Bolshoi Moskvoretsky Bridge gleams under the sun like an improvised runway. He decides that will be the place. Unknowingly, he's about to write the most surreal scene of the Cold War. And while the white plane descends over the river, Moscow goes on with everyday life. No one imagines that the greatest security failure of the Soviet Empire is unfolding in plain sight. The city opens beneath the little plane like an endless model. Rust skims rooftops, crosses avenues, follows the Moskva River until the Kremlin's red wall fills his windscreen. In front of it, the colorful domes of St. Basil's glow in the afternoon light. It is the precise center of Soviet power, the point no enemy was ever meant to reach. For a few seconds, Rust hesitates. Red Square looks broad, a perfect strip, but it is full of people. Tourists, soldiers, children, elders. Hundreds walk between the Kremlin towers and the walls of the historical museum. There is no space, no safety. If he lands there, someone could die. He pulls back, climbs a few meters, and makes a slow turn over the square. Below, heads tilt up. Some wave, thinking it is an official act. Others simply watch, incredulous as the little plane circles the Empire's heart. Rust stays calm. The engine vibrates. Fuel is almost at the limit. He looks south and sees the reflection of the Bolshoi-Moskvoretsky Bridge, a straight ribbon of asphalt crossing the river at the foot of Red Square. It is narrow, but sufficient. He lines up with the bridge, drops the gear, and reduces speed. Wind buffets the wings. The little plane settles gently. A few meters above the ground, Rust feels the shimmer of hot air rising from the asphalt. He eases back on the yoke. The wheels kiss the pavement with a soft squeal, bounce once, and stabilize. The Cessna rolls the bridge, brakes slowly, and stops just meters from the halted traffic. For a few seconds, nothing happens. The engine keeps turning. The sound of air fades. Rust cuts the mixture, turns off the switch, and silence becomes absolute. Only the river's murmur and the whisper of pedestrians approaching can be heard. He opens the cabin door and climbs down. His face is pale, his eyes reddened with fatigue. He wears a blue jacket, the headset hanging around his neck, and a smile that mixes relief and exhaustion. At first, passers-by keep their distance. Then one, a middle-aged man with a cap and coat, steps forward. "Where do you come from?" he asks, bewildered. Rust looks at him kindly. "From Germany," he answers. "I have come in peace." The man nods, not fully understanding, and smiles. Soon, more onlookers gather. Some congratulate him, thinking it is an official flight or propaganda act. Others touch the plane, marveling at its size. A child offers him a flower plucked from a nearby planter. Rust takes it and sets it on the panel. Everything seems unreal. A foreign plane parked beside the Kremlin, surrounded by smiling civilians without a single soldier in sight. Within minutes, the police arrive. 3 officers push through the crowd. There is no violence, no shouting, no weapons drawn. One of them, the ranking officer, approaches and speaks formally. "Citizen, show me your identification." Rust takes out his German passport, hands it over, and says calmly, "I have come to build a bridge between our peoples." The officer looks at him in silence, unsure whether he faces a spy, a madman, or a symbol. "Come with me, please." Rust nods and follows without resistance. Onlookers watch as he is led to a patrol car parked by the bridge. Before getting in, he turns his head. The Cessna is still there, motionless, with St. Basil's domes reflected in its white fuselage. It is an impossible image, absurd, beautiful. As the car pulls away and vanishes into the city center streets, the crowd keeps watching the plane. No one understands it, but everyone knows they have just seen something that should never have happened. And so, without a single shot, a 19-year-old had achieved what no army, no spy, and no power had managed in 40 years of Cold War: penetrate the heart of the Soviet Empire and land beside the Kremlin. The news traveled at the speed of shame. Just hours after the landing, images began to circulate. A small white plane stopped by the Kremlin, surrounded by onlookers and officers. The photograph was so absurd that many thought it was a Western montage, but it was not. The scene was real, and the symbol, devastating. On June 1, 1987, the world's newscasts opened with the same image. The most closed country on the planet had been crossed from north to south by a 19-year-old in a civilian light aircraft. In Hamburg, newspapers called it the flight of peace. In Washington, they called it the most expensive joke of the Cold War. In Moscow, no one dared joke. For the Soviet military, it was total humiliation. For 40 years, they had boasted of the most sophisticated air defense system in the world, thousands of radars, long-range missiles, supersonic interceptors, and a bureaucracy capable of mobilizing armies in minutes. And yet, A single man, unarmed and with no military plan, had traversed it completely, landed by the Kremlin, and greeted pedestrians. The incident became a political earthquake. The Minister of Defense, Sergei Sokolov, a veteran of the Second World War, was immediately dismissed. The same happened to Marshal Alexander Koldenov, Commander-in-Chief of Air Defense. Hundreds of high-ranking officers were demoted, and more than 1,000 received disciplinary sanctions. The purge spread like a silent storm through every branch of the military. For many inside the Kremlin, the shame was unbearable. In the corridors of the Ministry of Defense, they spoke of conspiracy, of impossible technical failures. But there was no way to deny it. The impenetrable net had failed before a civilian with a compass and a conviction. Gorbachev, however, saw an opportunity in the catastrophe. In the preceding months, his perestroika project had met fierce resistance inside the military apparatus. Veteran marshals considered his reforms a threat to the order and discipline that had sustained the country for decades. Now, with Rust's flight, the Soviet leader had an irrefutable argument. If the army could not protect even its own capital, how could it oppose change? The dismissals were not only punishment, they were a message, a public demonstration of political power disguised as technical correction. Gorbachev used the scandal to dismantle much of the old military guard, replacing the hardest line officers with younger cadres loyal to his vision of a reformed country. The USSR had been wounded not by a missile nor by an invasion, but by irony. A young man with no military experience had done what no Western power would have dared attempt: exposed the cracks in a system that believed itself perfect. For weeks, Soviet newscasts kept silent. The state press did not publish images of the incident until the Kremlin decided to control the narrative. Rust was presented as an airspace violator and the event as an imperialist provocation. But outside the country, the story was very different. The flight of a dreamer who had humiliated an empire. Matthias Rust's flight thus became more than an individual act. It was a mirror. It showed that the Soviet Union had not been pierced by a foreign enemy, but by its own fear, its own rigidity, and its inability to admit error. And while dismissals were signed in offices, the image of the little white plane kept floating over the Kremlin's conscience as an uncomfortable reminder that no wall, not even that of absolute power, is free of cracks. The flight of a young German had become, without meaning to, an internal blow, one that did not destroy the Soviet Union from without, but from within. The trial of Matthias Rust began in August of 1987 in the building of the Supreme Court of Moscow, under a guard more symbolic than judicial. The young German, thin, serene, dressed in a simple shirt and no prison uniform, listened to the charges read in Russian, a language he barely understood. He was accused of violating Soviet airspace, falsifying documents, and socially dangerous hooliganism. The word espionage also appeared, but even the judges knew it was absurd. During the hearings, the prosecutor struggled to construct a logic where there wasn't one. "Who sent you?" he asked again and again. Rust replied calmly, "No one. I went alone." "And what was your mission?" "To build a bridge." "A bridge? To what?" "Between East and West, between those who have stopped listening." The prosecutor fell silent for a few seconds before continuing, as if unsure whether to laugh or worry. The interrogators, hardened by years of pursuing real conspiracies, seemed disarmed by the innocence of this young man. In one session, a colonel attending as an observer broke the formality and asked directly, "And did you think landing in Moscow would bring peace?" Rust looked at him without irony, without a smile, and replied, "I thought at least it would make it visible." That phrase, repeated by the foreign journalists present, went around the world. To some it sounded naive, to others true. The court found him guilty and sentenced him to 4 years of hard labor in a penal camp. The sentence was severe, but brief, a warning without cruelty. The Kremlin did not want to make him a martyr. Rust was transferred to a prison near Moscow, where he worked as a kitchen assistant. He spent 14 months there, in relative calm, reading and writing letters to his family. In 1988, amid diplomatic détente, Gorbachev released him as a gesture of goodwill toward the West. On his return to Germany, the reception was ambiguous. Some greeted him as a visionary, a symbol of the end of the Cold War. Others ridiculed him as a reckless youth who had risked global stability for a fantasy. Newspapers called him the peace pilot, the boy who fooled the Kremlin, or simply the idiot who flew too far. Rust never tried to justify himself. In later interviews, he spoke quietly, without pride or regret. "I did not mean to humiliate anyone," he said. "I wanted to show that fear is not a wall. It can collapse if someone dares to go through it." Years later, historiography would place him in an unexpected spot, as a footnote to perestroika, an anecdote that helped, unintentionally, to accelerate the fall of the old Soviet order. His flight, more than a provocation, was a mirror. It showed that the enemy was not invincible, that the highest wall can hide a void, and that sometimes history changes not with a coup d'etat, but with a soft landing. In the West, his gesture became both symbol and warning. The image of the little plane beside the Kremlin circulated for years, reminding that even the most rigid systems can break from within, quietly, along a crack as simple as doubt. Unwittingly, Matthias Rust had become the last intruder of the Cold War, the youth who revealed a superpower's fragility with an act as small as a flight. And when, months later, the Soviet Union began to crumble under the weight of its own inertia, many would remember that image as a prophecy. The day a white light plane crossed Moscow's skies, the world discovered that fear can fall, too. In archive footage, the little white Cessna sits motionless on the Bolshoi Moskvoretsky Bridge. Soldiers surround the aircraft, technicians inspect it, civilians are gently moved back. A military truck approaches slowly, hooks a rope to the fuselage, and begins towing it out of the city center. The golden domes of St. Basil's reflect on its surface as it disappears into traffic. Little by little, the curious disperse. Police return to their posts. Trams resume their clanging on the avenues. Routine takes its place again, as if nothing had happened. But the damage is done. The country that believed itself impenetrable had been crossed, not by an army nor by foreign technology, but by a boy with a map, a compass, and an idea. The iron net, which the Kremlin had shown the world as its infallible shield, turned out to be smoke. Its strength was a myth sustained by fear, and a single flight was enough to bring it down. For decades, the Soviet Union had feared an invasion from the sky. In every drill, in every speech, in every radar turning night and day, the enemy was a shadow cast on the clouds. American planes, invisible missiles, satellites spying from space. But when the enemy finally came, he did not arrive with missiles or bombs. He arrived with a smile. Matthias Rust was not a hero, nor a villain, nor an instrument of any government. He was the reflection of an era collapsing. A young man who believed that faith, however naive, could cross the strongest walls. And in doing so, he revealed that those walls were more fragile than everyone wanted to admit. Blind faith in perfection fell that day. The illusion fell that vigilance could replace human judgment, that obedience was enough to sustain a system, that fear was a tool of control. Peace, sometimes, is not born of treaties or armies, but of an act of madness. On May 28, 1987, the sky over Moscow did not break. There were no explosions, no alarms, no smoke. Only the soft echo of wheels touching the asphalt of a bridge. The sky did not break, but the myth did.